Now, the PM is set to jet off to Beijing this Saturday for yet another meeting with Xi Jinping, and yet still no meeting with Donald Trump. Ahead of the PM's trip, former security and diplomatic chief Dennis Richardson has warned China will engage in coercive trade practices, saying we've got to remain aware they're not a paragon of virtue when it comes to trade, and that Beijing will put us in the doghouse again if we fall out politically. And of course, we saw this when Scott Morrison raised valid questions about the origins of COVID. Joining me now to break down the PM's China trip and more, former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer. Thank you for your time. Alexander, what should be the red lines for the PM on this trip? He's reportedly rebuffed China's approach to include AI in a broader trade deal, but what else?
Well, I think it's very important the Prime Minister is robust in supporting Australia's broad geopolitical interests. So we expect China to adhere to the rule of international law in South China Sea, and particularly in relation to Taiwan. And I think he should have frank discussions with China about how the United States, Australia, and our broader alliance are concerned about the assertion of Chinese power, inappropriate assertion of Chinese power. So it's not just about trade. I mean, there'll be all sorts of details about trade. But the problem for the Prime Minister is he has no relationship with the President of the United States because he's not met him. I mean, it means he goes to Beijing without the one great advantage Australia has always had in Asia, and that is that it has been the country which is closest to the United States of any country in the region, and the United States is the country ultimately on which we all depend for the balance of power in Asia. So, and it's in that sense, the Prime Minister goes to Beijing with a relatively weak hand.
Well, speaking of that, it will be his second trip to China in 2 years. And as you say, he hasn't got this meeting with Trump. I mean, do you see this as part of our drift closer to Beijing, especially with that speech, the John Curtin speech that Albanese gave recently? He seemed to be suggesting that.
Yeah, I mean, he is beginning to downplay the importance of the US alliance. He looks at it in that speech, looks at it entirely in the wrong way. He just thinks the US alliance exists so America can come to our support if somebody invades Australia. But it's much more than that. The US alliance that we have is part of the broad balance of power relationship in the Indo-Pacific region. And he doesn't even begin to understand the importance of the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region. If you want a peaceful region, you need an active America in the region, working closely with its allies and allies who contribute to that alliance. He has to try to think in those broader terms. So, yeah, I think what he is doing is reducing the importance of the American alliance. After all, President Trump has been the president since January this year. It's now July, and he still hasn't even met President Trump in that time, and rushing off to Beijing, which is the power that the United States and its allies are trying to balance in the Indo-Pacific region. I mean, it's a bit odd.
It's odd and it's embarrassing, I think, too. And look, speaking of Trump, we've got this ongoing tariff war, concerns now that the US president's proposal to slap a 200% tax on pharmaceuticals could impact the PBS. We also find out today Trump will follow through on this 50% tariff on copper, citing security concerns. What are your thoughts about these two specific tariffs, especially given how essential copper is for the defense sector? Is this the right call?
It's the wrong call. I'm not a supporter of tariffs at all, and I think it is the real downside of the Trump administration. The passion that President Trump has for for tariffs, though there are many upsides and they've done many things well. But this is one thing which is not a positive contributor to the stability of the global economy. However, faced with the threat of these tariffs, the Prime Minister should, I mean, he's our head of government. He should be engaging with his American counterpart, President Trump. He should build a relationship with him. By contrast, Keir Starmer, the British Labour Prime Minister, coming from a completely different political perspective from President Trump, he has built a very successful relationship with Trump, and that's been very much to the advantage of the UK. It's just an extraordinary thing that the Prime Minister of Australia has such a distant, apparently cold relationship with the President of the United States, who he has apparently never met.
Oh, it does not bode well at all. Just finally, very quickly, the European Court of Human Rights has found Russia was in fact responsible for the downing of flight MH17, in which 298 people, including 38 Australians, died. Alexander, I think this was already pretty clear, but how much weight, if any, does this finding carry? And do we have any hope of ever getting justice? Just quickly.
Well, we have to persuade the Russians, and that won't be possible in the short term. And this just confirms what we already know. The European Court of Justice doesn't have any jurisdiction in Russia, though, because Russia was expelled from the court and from the European Court Human Rights Convention some years ago. So it's symbolic. It doesn't have any practical meaning.
Alexander Downer, thank you so much for your time.